The sun hung low over the skyline, its golden glow painted permanently across the buildings of New York City. Somewhere in the distance, the faint echo of a traffic jam blared, a sound that had replayed every day for the past 6 weeks. Clara Reed tightened her grip on the cold metal railing of her apartment balcony. The air was stagnant, just like everything else. The same birds hovered in the same patch of sky, wings frozen mid-flap. Pedestrians down below repeated their short, lived walks, oblivious to the temporal prison they were trapped inside. The time never changed. Clara's watch beeped, right on schedule. It was the same reminder she'd set weeks ago, before the loops began. A lab appointment at 7. Only now, appointments didn't matter. Jobs didn't matter. Nothing mattered when time refused to move forward. The aliens had called themselves the Velari, an ancient race, cold and calculating. No one had seen them coming. Their ships hadn't descended with fire and noise. Instead, the world had gone quiet. 12 major cities, including New York, were severed from the flow of time in an instant. The Velari hadn't conquered Earth, they'd paused it. World leaders outside the loops scrambled for answers, but the best minds were trapped here, repeating their thoughts over and over again. Caught in the loop, they were useless. Clara brushed a strand of hair from her face, frustration building in her chest. She wasn't a world-renowned scientist, just a junior physicist at a university lab. But she was awake, fully aware of the loop, and that counted for something. A voice broke through her thoughts. Still hoping for a miracle, Clara. It was Jordan, her neighbor. His wary smile mirrored her own despair. He clutched a mug of coffee, steam curling from it, as though time hadn't decided to pause for him. It was one of the few things they could still manipulate, small, personal items. Everything else was fixed. "Maybe I'm hoping for a mistake," Clara said. Jordan chuckled bitterly. "Aliens this advanced don't make mistakes." But something about that statement gnawed at her. No system was perfect. And no matter how precise the Velari's weapon was, it had trapped living, breathing humans. People who operated on messy, unpredictable biology. Her heart thudded in her chest. She took a breath, then another, letting the rhythm of it fill her mind. "What if?" she whispered. "We're not as predictable as they think." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Clara didn't answer. Not yet. But a tiny spark ignited in her mind, flickering with the promise of something new. Maybe there was a way out of this loop after all. Clara paced the narrow confines of her apartment, her mind buzzing. The walls felt closer now, the air staler. 6 weeks trapped in a day that never ended. But that gnawing thought, maybe we're not predictable, refused to let go. Her eyes flicked to her desk, cluttered with notes and half-finished ideas. Diagrams of time loops, fractal patterns, and equations that made her head ache. She had tried everything she knew about quantum physics, relativity, and temporal mechanics. Nothing worked. But she kept coming back to one fact. She was still aware. Conscious. Not everyone trapped in the loop was. Most people repeated the same actions endlessly, unaware of their prison. A few, like Clara and Jordan, retained their memories with each reset. Why, what made them different? She pulled out her notebook and flipped to a blank page. Grabbing a pen, she wrote one word: cows. It was a fundamental principle in physics. In chaotic systems, tiny differences in initial conditions led to wildly different outcomes. Like the flutter of a butterfly's wings triggering a hurricane. The Velari's temporal weapon worked on predictable, ordered systems. But what if humans were inherently chaotic? A pen tapped against the page as she thought. "Come on, Clara, think," she muttered. A knock at the door broke her focus. Jordan stepped in, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Any breakthroughs?" he asked. Maybe, she said, the word hesitant. Jordan, do you remember what you were doing the moment the loop started? He scratched his head. Yeah, I was brushing my teeth. Why? Same exact way every day. He shrugged. More or less. Clara's fingers drummed on the notebook. That's the thing. More or less. It's never exactly the same, is it? Your rhythm, your motions, they vary, even slightly. Jordan frowned. What are you getting at? She exhaled slowly. The Velari's loop is perfect. It expects us to be predictable. But human life is messy. Biological processes. Our heartbeats. Our thoughts. They're never perfectly consistent. Maybe that inconsistency is the crack in their system. Jordan's eyes widened. You think the answer is heartbeats? It's a place to start, she said. If the loop can't perfectly sync with our biological rhythms, maybe we can exploit that. Her own heartbeat thudded in her chest, an erratic drum she couldn't control. Unpredictable. Unique? Jordan nodded slowly. So, how do we test it? We find the edges of the loop, Clara said. See where the cracks are widest. And push. A surge of purpose filled her veins. For the first time in weeks, the endless day didn't feel so endless. There was a chance, however small, that humanity's chaos could defeat the Velari's order. It was time to find out. The lab was eerily quiet, bathed in the same dawn light it had been for weeks. Clara's sneakers squeaked on the linoleum floor as she stepped inside, clutching her notebook. The walls were lined with equipment, most of it useless now. Computers that had reset their data to factory defaults, monitors frozen on the same screens. Jordan followed, his face pale but determined. He held a portable heart monitor he'd scavenged from a nearby clinic. You're really sure about this? He asked, offering the device to Clara. No, she admitted, taking it. But I'm out of ideas, and doing nothing isn't an option. She strapped the heart monitor to her wrist and took a deep breath. The display lit up with a simple readout, 72 beats per minute. A steady pulse. Clara stared at the screen, then looked at the room around her. All this technology, all these calculations, and it came down to something as simple as a heartbeat. Something the Velari didn't account for. Something unpredictable, messy, and uniquely human. Let's begin, she said. Jordan powered up the only piece of equipment they'd managed to get working, an old EEG machine cobbled together with wires and patches. It could read her brainwave patterns and physical responses. They hoped it could also catch the moment the loop reset. The exact instant the Velari's temporal net tightened around reality. Clara closed her eyes. Her heartbeat filled her ears, loud and irregular. Thud, thud. Thud, thud. She focused on the rhythm, feeling the rise and fall of her chest, the rush of blood through her veins. Humans were chaotic by nature. Every heartbeat was slightly different, responding to stress, thought, fear. A pattern no machine could predict. Starting the EEG now, Jordan said. Brace yourself. The machine hummed to life, and data spooled onto the screen. Lines of brainwaves and heartbeats danced across the monitor in chaotic patterns. Clara's mind raced, matching the beat of her heart. Thud, thud. Pause. Thud, thud. Her fingers twitched. Something about the pauses, the irregular gaps, felt important. They were the tiny cracks in an otherwise perfect loop. Her eyes snapped open. Jordan, what if we disrupt the loop with something as unpredictable as the heartbeat itself? He frowned. You mean force the loop to trip over our own biology? Exactly. Her voice rose with excitement. We need to time our actions to our heartbeats, right at the moment the loop resets. If the Velari's system expects total order, we'll introduce just enough chaos to break free. Jordan's gaze hardened. "We've got one shot at this, don't we?" Clara nodded. "We either break the loop or stay trapped forever." Her heartbeat surged, faster now, filled with hope and fear. The clock on the wall flickered. 6. The reset was coming. They were ready to dance to the rhythm of chaos. The seconds ticked down towards 6:27 a.m. Clara's breath came in measured pulls, her fingers icy despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The glow of the heart monitor pulsed with each beat, erratic, imperfect, alive. Jordan hunched over the EEG readout, his eyes scanning the chaotic waves of her heart rhythm and brain activity. 20 seconds to reset, he murmured, voice tight. Clara wiped her palms on her jeans. This had to work. Their entire plan hinged on a theory cobbled together from scraps of physics, hope and desperation. If they failed, they'd be snapped back to the beginning of the loop, with no way to know how many more chances they'd get, if any. Her heart fluttered, then pounded harder. Thud, thud, pause. Thud, a glitch in the pattern. She latched onto it, trying to feel where the loop brushed against the edges of reality, where a heart's chaos might throw a wrench into the Velari's perfect machine. 10 seconds, Jordan said. She clenched her fists, grounding herself in the moment. The hum of the EEG, the faint chill of the lab, Jordan's sharp, measured breathing beside her. All reminders that she was here, not just a puppet of the loop. Thud, thud, pause. Thud, 5 seconds. The clock flickered. Her mind zeroed in on the rhythm, the gaps, the unpredictability that made her human. Thud, now? Reset? Jordan shouted. Clara shoved all her focus into that instant, pushing her mind and heartbeat outward, like a chaotic pulse striking the edge of the loop. The world trembled, a shimmer running through the air, as if reality itself were vibrating. A sharp, cold pressure squeezed her skull. The lab lights flickered violently. Then, a snap. The sensation of falling sideways through space. Light shattered and reformed. The world twisted. She landed hard, knees hitting cold pavement. Gasping, Clara lifted her head. The sky was streaked with dawn, but it wasn't the same dawn she'd seen for weeks. This one was alive, fluid, no longer a stale facsimile. The air was sharp with possibility. Jordan stumbled beside her, wide-eyed. Did it work? Clara's heart was still pounding, wild and erratic. She looked up, tears burning her eyes. The clock on a nearby building read 1 minute later. They'd made it through. A shaky laugh bubbled from her lips. Yeah? Oh, we did it. For the first time in weeks. Time flowed forward. The loop was broken. But they both knew the fight wasn't over. The Velari would notice the tear in their perfect net. And when they did, they'd come looking for whoever had escaped. Clara rose to her feet, determination hardening her voice. We have to warn the others. Humanity's greatest weapon is our chaos. And we're just getting started? Jordan nodded, a grin spreading across his face. Then let's give them a fight they'll never forget. They walked into the dawn. Hearts beating their unpredictable rhythm. A song no machine could silence.